Hello, everyone. My name is Phoenix Rokni. I am the author of The Fall of Magic, which is book one in the Master's Core series. I didn't start writing until my very early 40s. I'll be 44 in just the later part of this month in June. My first novel, The Fall of Magic, was my debut novel. I have gotten overall really good reception from the people that have read it so far. A lot of really good feedback, so I'm very appreciative for that. But I wanted to put together a video that I've been far overdue to share with everyone here. I've been doing shorts for a while, essentially bringing those shorts over from my TikTok and Instagram and things like that, juggling, creating content while writing and working. I've also got a YouTube called The Master's Core for my fantasy IP that I aim to one day have a tabletop card game created for. Game that you will read about in my books, and also, if it works out, a video game or a set of video games. I guess it kind of depends on how it all goes. There's a lot of reasons for that. Video games, I think, are another way to explore my world in between certain time periods where the story doesn't necessarily, the story in terms of the writing in the books doesn't really necessarily explore it directly. You hear about it through passages or explanations or tomes and things like that from the archives, or people who lived it that are still alive during that time to kind of like catch the reader up on what those things are and what had kind of been going on behind the scenes while time might have passed in between books, things like that. But I wanted to make a video here to just sort of like touch base, say hello, introduce myself officially outside of my silly shorts that I have fun making. Shout out to my wife, by the way, because she's a big part of helping me to ensure that I can get those things up regularly and sort of taking that off my plate. So I might record them, but she helps me to post them and take care of that. So I don't have as much of that to do and or worry about. The Fall of Magic came out in December of 2024, December 15th, technically. I have Persian heritage and background. So there are elements that are in my fantasy world that are sort of nods to Persian mythology, though not a direct representation of it. To be fair, a lot of Persian mythology and things like that are some of them are quite vague. They're not very specifically noted as being very concrete. And while I am doing that, and I am nodding at that, and I am drawing influence for some things, you also still have a lot of traditional fantasy elements and creatures and things like that, because I also just absolutely love the fantasy genre. I just love anything with a good story. I didn't actually start reading until I was an adult, believe it or not. I mean, I've read some fantasy novels, but I didn't really consider myself an avid fantasy reader. I would say that I do now, and I think that part of that was because when I went through the journey of teaching myself how to write fantasy and just to write fiction, fantasy fiction in general, I came to realize that, I had a lot to learn, and one of the best places to learn is to go see how the professionals, the even iconic fantasy authors have done that. First one I looked to is J.R.R. Tolkien, for obvious reasons. I love his work. He's been a huge inspiration for how I sort of mapped out my own fantasy world and put together the ideas that have been brewing in my brain for over 20 years. I would say that my writing is epic high fantasy. The first novel is quite short for a fantasy work. Part of that's because I wanted to make sure I told the story right. Also, it is a kind of faster paced story, but it's also an introduction into my fantasy world, into what the world of Oro is. It also was me making sure I told a story right for the first time. And while there might be some things that I have to learn along the way, because no one does a perfect job the first go, there is a lot of that book I'm very proud about. I told the story, I did my job, I told it well. And one day, whenever I get done with the Master's Core series, I aim to come back and do a definitive edition of that book that really gives it all the bells and whistles and the benefit of my experience as an author over the course of the Master's Core series, which, by the way, I don't think I can conceivably tell that story without a bare minimum of 6 to 10 books, probably. It's a rather large story. I decided to go for the ultimate showdown, like the Lord of the Rings, I guess, would be for J.R.R. Tolkien's work, if you're familiar with it. Taking down the bad guy, the guy that's been a plaguing problem for a long time. In my world, it's the equivalent of a Morgoth, right? It's the Dark Master, and he's a problem. And then I want to go in and I want to do a Strife and Sorrow series, which the title of which will make a lot of sense to people that are interested in the Master's Core. And the other point, why did I start writing? And that is because I had a story to tell, and it's a rather large, extensive one that coalesced over the course of my life. And I came to realize that all of the things I had done, all of the skills I had, gained along the way, doing the different things I've done in my life, were really leading me to be a writer, to tell the story. Because when I realized that I had a whole world in my brain that had come to life, I had to get it out. Maybe that's sort of the problem for any author or artist. But I'm already in work on book 2, very well along the way, I would say. I'm doing roughly 50,000 words a month right now, manuscript for the second book, which will be probably double the size, maybe slightly larger than book 1, rather large one. And book 2 is always intended to be that. It will always be longer than book 1, even when it's expanded, because there are things in book 2 that are my devices for telling the story and explaining the world and the history. And that'll make a lot of sense when book 2 arrives early next year. Honestly, I could go on a ramble about my books, my world, my fantasy stuff and things for far too long. You can already see we've gone well over what I expected for this video. But this video is just to say hello, to welcome you to this channel. This is the kind of stuff I'd like to be doing here more. So if you have any questions, whether it's about my fantasy world, the first book, the second book, about my journey as an author, please don't be shy. Leave a comment down below. I will make sure that there's a link as well for the Discord and all of the places you can find the Master's Core or me. Personally, everybody that reads my book is someone I consider to be a part of my own fellowship. They're the people that go on a journey with me into. Ultimately, my goal is to find as many people as possible that I can nerd out about my world with. So if that sounds like the kind of stuff you're into, and you love a world with deep lore and magic and mythological creatures and really high stakes, ultimately high stakes, light versus dark, heroes versus villains, where the darkness is on the cusp of taking everything, this might be something for you. So I welcome you all, encourage you to join on all the places. As for the other YouTube channel, The Master's Core, you will probably see at some point in the near future some short little blurbs sharing information about characters and the world, things that sort of associate with the website, which masterscore.com is a great compendium of information to supplement anyone who's interested in the fantasy world. I ultimately thought that if there's going to be a website online that's going to help sort of be like a wiki or an information resource for people, what better place to go to than the guy who created it himself, right? Thanks for hanging out. If you made it to the end, you are a champion in my eyes, and much love. And I hope to do this again sometime in the near future. So take care, everybody, and back to writing for me. Bye, everyone.